next stage of the engine build pretty much is, while I'm waiting on some parts, I've sent the com rods off because I'm getting little end bearings. I've put the little end bearings in, which are actually these, basically just sleeves, but they're slightly oversized, so that is what goes in the center there, in underneath the piston, in the actual com rod, and then this pin's meant to go through, but because they're meant to be a very well, absolutely perfect fitment that they just can move, so they are a fully floating pin. They've got to be put in, pressed in, and then basically reamed out, so I haven't got a reamer to do that. So I've sent them off to get done. So the next stage I was doing the piston rings. So I've done 4 already, so I've got the last 2 new packs of piston rings, and then I'm going to seat the valves in and put new stem seals in. So that's tonight's job. Pretty much starting with, we've got in the packet here, should be 3 rings, so easy as anything, starting from the bottom, A, B and C. So there's one for the, well, that basically pulls the oil down, and that's for lubricating them. It stops oil being burnt, is the bottom one, and the other 2 are sort of basically for gases, the main sort of impact as such, to stop as much pressure going on the oil one. So pretty much just start, they're sort of loose, you can just pull them apart like that, a bit like a circlet type thing, he says, and then he can't do it. That's first one off, and second one. So trick is to sort of, because they're quite loose in, obviously when they compress, so you get to the back and push it with your thumb like that, and then try and pull it apart to widen it. Get the 2 ends out like that, keep him pulling apart, and then you should just be able to pop it off like that. Another one done. And this is the easiest one to do, is the first ring basically, because that's a lot thinner. That's actually a different type altogether, rather than just a solid piece of metal. It's sort of got oil gaps in to lubricate, and then it's got this little sort of spring behind which actually just comes apart. So that's off. Then we get A, the first one, just give it a wipe. So just basically make sure there's no rubbish behind. Then a bit of oil to basically lubricate around the ring. That first one I'll just a little bit just spread it round just to help it before it gets oil basically sent round the engine, so it doesn't need much. And then this is the most awkward one, trying to keep the little spring in the centre. So you can put the little spring round first, so I'll take that out, put that round first, and then this over the top, which I found easier, but just make sure, because there's a split in the back of it which I don't want to take apart, but like that, where the bit of wire goes in the centre. So keep that split, which is at the back there, to this side of the ring, away from the crack. And then obviously as your rings go up, the 3, you try and keep the gaps in opposite directions, just to help it seal a bit better. So that, like that, and then it just pushes round, new ring, and then make sure, because there's a top and a bottom sometimes, but not on the bottom ring. So yeah, we're fine with that. But basically these are a bit easier because they're wider to start off with. they must shrink a little bit as they get hot. So making sure cracks at the back, and then just make sure that inner spring is actually in the ring, and then just turn it around a bit to get the oil everywhere. Perfect. Then we need B. Now B is slightly different shapes as well. B does have a side, being that's the top, like that, because it is actually chamfered on the inside edge there. So basically on the bottom, as compression goes down, it will actually push the ring slightly down and widen it to put more pressure. Then the top one, C, is actually just a square section effectively. But that just, again, a little bit round, not much, just to help it when it first goes in, and I will put a little bit when I slide them down the bores. So a bit round like that, then over again, and then pull it apart and slide it in. There we go. So they're actually a little bit wider when they're compressed. So I don't know whether it's heat or whether it's just slightly different rings with the first lot, but they're a lot tighter around the piston. So that's B. And finally, same again, is C. So making sure there's no top or bottom, or if there is, putting it in the right direction. A little bit round. And then just slot over. So changing piston rings is actually one of the easiest jobs. It's just getting to them, which is the hard bit. There, all done. Perfect. When it comes to actually putting it in, once I've got the rod on, you see the gap here, you want to put one gap to one side, then the next ring up, you want to put the gap for that directly opposite. So basically, if it was like that, if they were all together like that, there would be, because they don't go absolutely 100% touching, they don't create 100% seal there, so it's just an initial to create the force to carry the piston. So if they're all in line like that, you'd have more of a chance of getting through. But if they're all turned in different directions, so obviously your first two directly opposite, and then put your third sort of halfway around, then any gas has to go down, across, down, and then back across, and then down again. So it just helps it a little bit.